But how was this wealth distributed that I have described? While speculative fortunes were being enhanced, in one Fianna Fáil TPD budget after another, Ireland still remained among the worst countries as adjudged by the OECD for wealth distribution. In 2006, it was in 27th place out of 30 countries. In the same year, while claiming to be the second richest country in the European Union, and sometimes at the very top of this country, people would say, we were the second richest people in the world. We were the second lowest in terms of social protection. Social protection includes childcare, housing, amenity facilities, health, transport, all the basics in general for a decent living. Social protection is what in any country defines the quality of citizenship. We must then, comrades, remember that this version of the economy which has brought us into this crisis was possible because the parties who promoted it, all these policies, they secured political support. In trying to make sense of that, why was that so? I'm reminded of something I said at a Labour conference a long time ago. Perhaps R.H. Tawney, the historian, was right in his old observation about inequality. He gave the example of tadpoles who put up with their miserable condition in the prospect that one of their number might one day sprout a jaw and leap to land and become a frog. Some no doubt felt that their day might come, that they might be able to drive at speed in dark glasses in an SUV out of a gated community in style. Perhaps this was so. But we should remember too that there was uncritical institutional support for this version of the economy. Support from banks, the higher echelons of the state, university presidents, county managers. I remember the former secretary of our government department who said to me, "Did you ever think the day would come when my son would be buying a £500,000 house?" And he poured this civil servant and he was an exception, I say, because so many of them are committed to the public. But all the people I mentioned bought into the single model of the speculative economy. There was particular enthusiasm from what were called movers and shakers, from what might be called the toxic elite, who hopped from one board to another with different levels of financial agility and illegality. This toxic elite, we should remember, they remain largely in place. It is these same people who now turn to the state and the taxpayer for succour and support, for guaranteed solvency for all their operations, including the toxic assets, the source of their past remuneration and bonuses. Keeping that show solvent has been, as many small businesses will be aware, at the cost of liquidity, a liquidity that is vital not just to create but to retain jobs. And already, of course, taxpayers in general are paying for the actions of that small, toxic, illegal network. We are all doing so, insofar as the government borrows for day-to-day running of the country at a rate several points higher on foot of the damage done to the country's reputation. That reputational capital, which had been built up over decades, was squandered by the irresponsible actions of some of those who headed Anglo-Irish Bank, aided by those who chose not to inform themselves, who are still there, and those who colluded by their silence, who are in several companies. Let me then make some suggestions that flow from what I have said. We cannot, nor should we, seek to solve our immediate fiscal problems by addressing our revenue demands solely to income. We have to target and claw back a real contribution from such wealth which has been accrued. Much of that wealth admittedly has been reduced by collapsing markets. That is so. But Fianna Fáil-led governments facilitated all of this in one Macready budget after another, and that has to be retraced. I should say as well, what were we doing in this period? It's interesting that these two parties who never will criticise this model, I include Fine Gael with Fianna Fáil. In the Cóirí, for example, Goodbody's economic consultants report, about between 1999 and 2006. 7 years. The urban renewal scheme in terms of tax revenue forgone was 1,423 billion for the 7 years. The revenue commissioners themselves were saying in 2004 that the annual cost of property tax reliefs was 8.4 billion euro each year. This, roughly, what was being given to this speculation would be the equivalent of 22% of all taxation. So not everybody benefited from what is called the boom of the Celtic Charger years. And please let the media listen to that. Please let them look at where the wealth was and where it was located. Let us put an end to this myth. Let us put an end to the myth, once and for all, if we do nothing else at this conference, to the suggestion that we all shared in wealth accumulation. Indeed, it is very interesting that of those who benefited from the tax relief on multi-storey car parks, over 80% of them, 86%, all had incomes of over 200,000 a year. The more disposable income you had to spare, the more you could use your accountant to benefit from the property tax relief.